Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cryptoconomy podcast. Today I'm here with Barney Mannerings, the co founder of Vega Protocol. So, thank you so much for being here, Barney.
Thank you for having me.
So, to get started, I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about your journey from traditional finance to the blockchain world and how that came into the founding of Vega.
Yeah, sure. It sort of came a little bit full circle. I started, I guess, on my sort of journey as a computer scientist and was very interested in sort of privacy technology, encryption, some of that kind of cypherpunk stuff, I guess, back in the early 2000s. Ended up working in traditional finance, designing and building trading and risk systems for things like equities, derivatives, FX. So I spent a lot of time with traders and with trading technology, building and learning about those things. And then obviously you had kind of Bitcoin and the white paper there. Then you had sort of, which was very interesting and exciting to me. And I did a little bit of mining early on. And then Ethereum was where it really started to like pique my interest because it's suddenly like, okay, this is not just like a kind of inert coin that I can pass around and hold, but it's a layer on which I can build infrastructure and technology that is kind of performing some of the functions of institutions. And having looked at it from the inside and worked with traders and worked with building technology, I could see all the inefficiencies, the regulatory capture, the gatekeeping that went on. I could see all of that, and I saw this as an opportunity. So actually ended up not doing anything on Ethereum. I sort of looked at it and looked at what traders want, and sort of traders want really high throughput, really low fee, all of those things, and obviously Ethereum didn't give that. So we sort of did this kind of analysis of the entire sort of trade life cycle and everything, and decided not to do anything there. Ended up founding another company, and then sort of long story short, met my co-founder Ramsey while I was working on that other company. Started talking to researchers about proof of stake and Tendermint and all of the latest developments of like how to do, um, high performance and new types of blockchain. So that really piqued our interest, 2017 particularly, and then sort of early 2018 we started forming this plan to build Vega. And really the idea was to take all of the things that I know about what traders want and what a good quality professional trading platform needs to be able to do, and work out how to put that into a fully decentralized system that is kind of open and permissionless for people to create markets and innovate and build outside of the kind of gatekeeper traditional institutions which slow things down and kind of rent seek and all of those things. So that was kind of the journey. And then obviously since then we've been building and launching and open sourcing code for 5 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. 5 years, if you're still around after that, that's pretty good in crypto. So that's an accomplishment. So how have you balanced, I guess, creating a product for the people who might be in traditional finance with the really hardcore Web3 folks? Has some of your background helped you to productize this for the average user? Are you focused more on the Web3 natives? What's your strategy in
Yeah.
that space?
I think the background helps with building something that works. Like I remember even in centralized exchanges early on in the sort of days of early centralized derivatives on things like OKX and all of those different exchanges. I can't remember which exchange it was, but there was one that had done a really naive like margin and liquidation algorithm. And effectively there was a big move and a whole bunch of people just got like lost socialization because the system wasn't designed well. So you sort of saw that stuff happen due to kind of naivety and lack of experience. So, it certainly meant that we can design products that are going to work well and be robust and, uh, you know, give people the outcome they expect from these kind of products. On the other hand, we were sort of solving for replace some subset of like, New York and the city of London with crypto and DeFi. And what surprised us was the size and scale and rise of this kind of like degen, Web3, native, whatever movement. And those people want very different things. And, they're not all just even like super small retail users punting like $100 here and there. Some of them have large amounts of money. Perhaps they got into crypto very early. Some of them are even sort of semi-professional funds, but they still have a quite retail mindset, still think very differently about risk management, about the tools and UX they expect. And that caught us by surprise a little, in that we weren't really targeting it. But then at a certain point, it was so big we couldn't ignore it. And we were sort of sat there going, well, we could try this really hard sell of get this stuff into really big traditional institutions and get around all, work out all the regulatory stuff, work out the legal stuff, the audit stuff. or we could find this like group of people who are already willing to trade on these kind of platforms, but they want a different thing. So probably 1.5 to 2 years ago now, we had pretty much decided we were going to be aiming for some of those users to be the first users of the Vega software. And we started to pivot our thinking in terms of UX and in terms of product features more towards how to give those people what they want. And so, the experience I have and everything was very interesting there, but there's also a big gap that I have is not actually being one of those people and not being super active in those types of trading community. But we have plenty of really talented team members who are. So that's been okay. But it's kind of interesting to see how different that world is, despite the fact it's sort of superficially similar to other trading environments.
Yep, no, I certainly understand that. I'm certainly part of that world. I am very much the crypto native type. I don't keep money in a bank. I hate traditional finance, and I know a lot of those same people, but I also straddle both because all of my investors in my startups, they're all from traditional finance. They've come from Citadel and places like that, and so you get to see both sides of it, and I think it's tough to build for both sides at the same time,
Yeah,
but
and I think the interesting thing is like I very much in terms of where I sit and ideologically and politically, I hate the TradFi, the organizations and the rigmarole and the way that they sort of work with regulators to kind of keep people out, keep innovation down, and keep profits themselves and all of that. But what I do think is very important and very for DeFi is that a lot of what they do is provide a service that makes things happen. Like you can fund an infrastructure project, you can hedge the price of fueling your jet or whatever as an airline, and those real world use cases for these things enable a much richer ecosystem of finance and enable something other than just the kind of speculative 50x long perps casino. And I think I sort of want to take the group of people who are in the Web3 natives and who are doing those things now, and I want to work out how to get them and people like them using DeFi and selling DeFi to the rest of the world as something that can actually eventually do those same jobs and solve for those other use cases. Because I think we'll be much more successful as an industry, and it'll be much more interesting in the future if DeFi and blockchain is actually doing those loans that fund infrastructure projects or used for hedging. So I think I want the Web3 natives to take over the city. I want them to kick out Citadel and replace them with smart contracts and replace them with open systems.
yep, I think that's exactly what I would like to see too. And I think, our last podcast, we just had someone come on. They're trying to tokenize things like treasuries. They're trying to make it more approachable for corporate entities, and they're verifying identity and doing all the KYC so that they can do those checks. And so there are a lot of people trying to fill in those sort of pieces of the puzzle to get both sides to come together. And I think it'll happen eventually. And it's just a matter of, the right people coming in with that experience to, the average person like me who loves the sort of degen Bitcoin stuff is not the guy who goes to the regulators and makes sure that the hedge funds can do everything in the right way. But on the flip side of that, I guess my question, you're coming from, more of a traditional background. How do you differentiate yourself from a lot of these platforms that have given the industry sort of a bad name? You had all of the people like Celsius who, offered what seemed to be really crazy interest rates. And, at some level, if they had been smarter about how they structured it, some of it could have worked. But how do we change the perspective in the industry to help people understand that, you really can decentralize lending if, you just do have the right things in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing obviously is decentralized, truly decentralized, and publicly auditable protocols are strictly better. I mean, if you want to have a centralized financial product, you really want it to be well regulated in a good jurisdiction with strong regulators, because you don't know how dodgy and how intelligent the people running it are. So you want someone to be asking for a report every day on like their capital,
Yeah,
capital
not the Cayman
utilization, everything like
Islands.
that, right? So if you want centralized, you actually probably want the regulation because you have no other way to be sure it's not going to be disappear. If you want the way to solve those problems is to not actually deal with the centralized crypto. It's actually to insist on decentralization, insist on verifiability, but also to be honest about where we are. Like, we don't I think, with terror, sometimes you'd hear them talking about this is better than your bank, it has all this, you should put your money here instead of a bank, you get much better, it's like a bank account with 20%. And it's kind of like, well, it's not. It's not so many risks, it's so early in its journey that even if it wasn't 100% certain it was going to blow up, its probability of blowing up was way more than your bank account. And there was no, financial services compensation scheme or whatever, Federal Reserve insurance. So, you sort of look at that and say, you shouldn't be saying things like that to your users because that's dishonest and disingenuous. So we will sort of say, Vega is in alpha. It might be broken. Like we think it's designed to be, transparent and to show you what's happening and to not give us access to any funds and all those things. So it's designed to be a very good actor. But we also have to be good actors in saying it might be designed like that, but it's new and early and not fully audited and evolving fast, and it could be broken. So, I think you have to just be honest, be open also about the risks. Like, if you're trading on this thing, you don't want to try and make people slide the leverage slider to 100x for a trade that they intend to keep open for 2 weeks, right? Like, it's one of those things. If you want to do a very leveraged thing, it's going to be for a short period and with a very specific entry and exit. If you're going to do something and have a thesis over multiple weeks, you slide it to 100x, you're going to be liquidated regardless of whether you were right about the direction of the coin. So, but then some UIs will encourage you to do those things and will encourage you to take those risks without explaining the risks. And so, again, it's like, I think people should be free to take all the risks they want. But I think the people making the UIs have a sort of responsibility, especially in an open, decentralized world where the guardrails are not there and anyone can do anything they want. They have a little bit of a responsibility to say, yeah, this is risky. Here's some links to how to understand that risk, to try and help put it in context. And so I think that's probably, and the more we do that, and then the more we develop a reputation for robustness and transparency, and we build out some more of those real world use cases, the more people will see that crypto can be good and that, people can manage their own finances. And this is it's like the internet for knowledge. It does that for the value of finance, and that this is a good thing. And I think that's what we've got to show everyone, that it is a good thing.
Yeah, I think the point on the UI is huge. You go to like these sites like Rollbit and the minimum slider is like 20x, and so you're like, that's probably a reasonable, leverage
That's
amount.
probably pretty
And it
conservative,
goes,
right?
yeah, right, exactly. And it just goes all the way to 1,000, and it's just so easy to just click that slider back and forth. And they try to make it harder to do custom amounts and things like that. And so I think that's a huge point. And I think when it comes to decentralized, I think it's also tough, especially with things like leverage. When you're doing a 1,000x leverage trade, the throughput needs to be insanely high because if you're not, clicking the button the exact right second, and Ethereum takes, 5 minutes to get your trade
Yeah, I
executed,
mean,
you're not
exactly.
in a good place.
Someone issues a new NFT, your transaction gets stuck for 12 minutes, and now you're, even with low leverage, you're screwed. Yeah, I mean, and this is one of the reasons why we designed Vega as an app chain like we did. We kind of said, well, these things need to be different for trading to be good. And I think the block time on Vega mainnet is like 0.6, 0.7 seconds. It's still not as good as the best centralized exchange, but I've actually used centralized crypto exchanges that take longer to respond to clicking on the deal ticket submit button. Um,
Yep.
some of the ones, especially
Yeah.
during like 2017 when they were
Oh yeah.
creaking under the demand. I think Poloniex, I seem to remember sometimes just spinning for like 10 seconds. And
Yep.
so, we've got to a point where we can give an experience that's very similar to a centralized exchange and give some of that throughput and give some of those capabilities. It's not as good in some ways, but obviously it has all those benefits of decentralization. And transparency. So I think, we're building something that compared to, the Ethereums of the world, you can actually look at and go, I can see how someone could move from Binance to this and use it and trade these markets and get the same sort of experience. And that's a good thing.
Yep, no, that reminds me of when anytime there'd be a good Bitcoin pump, Coinbase trading would just completely shut down for like sell orders. Like buy orders would stay open, sell orders go down. It was always such a nightmare. And I will say, I've recently just been playing around with some of the other protocols. I've played around with some of the Solana products, and I will say that's like the only thing I've noticed where the throughput is high enough where like I can be like underwater on something. I can sell my NFTs on one platform, and within like 2 minutes, I can already have funded my other account, having swapped it around from from USDC back to Sol into a margin. Like, it's fast enough. So it can be done, and that's the first time where I played with it, and it felt actually like it was a real product that could be built out. And I
Yeah, and
think that can be
Vega's
done.
obviously a little more narrow focused. Like you don't have all
Yep.
these like NFT platforms. It's just kind of focused on the financial products. But you'll find the same thing, when you try Vega out, that actually you can enter a position do something, go long, whatever, get that, have put a stop loss on, the stop loss is stopped out or whatever, then immediately, in 2 seconds later, you can be entering another position in a different direction. Like you have, that ability to do those things. And, obviously it just opens up much more possibilities and makes it much more like a sort of real trading environment.
Yep. So how is Vega built exactly? Is it built as a layer two on top of Ethereum? Are you just pulling in, whatever deposits that users have and converting them to Vega to then be traded with? How is that system structured right
Yeah,
now?
so it's
Can I come
built.
in with Sol or
It's kind
Bitcoin?
of like it's a proof of stake chain. It's an app chain with running on Tendermint or Comet BFT as it's now called.
God.
Completely sort of custom engine running on the chain, so it's not sort of running under multiple layers of like sort of general purpose chain. It's really optimized, and that means there's things like, for instance, you don't pay any gas at all to place an order. We have different ways to
Nice.
deal with spam. But there's no gas fee to place an order or to delete an order, so you actually only pay when you trade, just like a real exchange. It's then bridged, and bridge is an interesting term because usually when you think of a bridge, you think of like a separate set of validators and security assumptions. The bridge is sort of built into the Vega chain, so there's only the Vega chain and the Ethereum chain. The Vega validators are the ones who are actually monitoring the Ethereum chain and controlling what goes on in the Ethereum bridge contract. So there's a sort of bridge with somewhat better security assumptions than when you have a sort of third piece of infrastructure doing the bridging. And that means you can send Ethereum ERC20 assets to the bridge. They basically just credited into Vega. There's no separate bridge step. It's literally just a deposit from your MetaMask or wherever, and it appears in your Vega balance, and then you can go trade again. Actually, we even released a MetaMask snap recently, so now you can actually use MetaMask as your Vega wallet as well. So you don't even have to
Oh,
download,
nice.
the Vega extension. I mean, the Vega wallet's got a few extra features and things that relate to Vega and trading, so it's kind of useful if you use Vega a lot. But you can actually just get started just with MetaMask now. So super nice, really.
Awesome. Do you have any plans to integrate like Phantom for Solana or some of the ordinal stuff for Bitcoin as other options? Because personally, me,
Yeah,
I hate Ethereum, so I just will not touch it. So if it's
yeah.
MetaMask, I'm like, no.
No, I mean I don't like MetaMask that much either as a UX. Like personally, I use other wallets, but it's a super popular onboarding method, so
Yep,
we've
sure.
gone and supported it. But in terms of other change, yes, we have plans. They're not super immediate. A lot of the money that is in sort of DeFi and trading is in stable coins in the RC20. We have a whole bunch of product upgrades and features. We just launched Perps actually. So Perps,
Awesome.
first Perps markets will be being created by community members in the next few days. So we've just launched Perps. We've just launched like extra Oracle integration stuff. We've also launched this feature which allows community members to kind of create and maintain like things like volume discounts and referral programs. So it's really interesting. Like Vega is very decentralized in that on a lot of dexes you kind of have this company that's running it like an exchange and setting up like a volume discount or whatever. We actually don't do that. We've built the features to do those things. So those features are available on the chain now. The community then decides, hey, we want to give people, we want to give referrals a 15% fee discount, or we want to change that discount. We want to give a volume discount if you do over X dollars of trading. So we've now launched those features, and the community are now in the process of discussing, like, do we want to have, referrals so that people can be rewarded for referring people to Vega, for instance. So yeah, so we've got all these features coming out. The next thing we're working on is like more and more easy market creation, kind of like hybrid AMM liquidity. So we have the order book at the moment. We'll actually have an order book and an AMM on the same market in a hybrid model, which means you can provide liquidity and earn fees without having to actually manage orders. So we've got all these cool features coming, and they're sort of probably deemed slightly more important and more valuable for the next phase of Vega's kind of adoption than another chain integration. So for now, it's probably going to be maybe Q2 next year, maybe something like that we
Yep.
start thinking about maybe targeting another chain. Don't hold your breath for that because all these priorities always change. But like,
Sure.
I mean, I'm really keen to do it because I think I wouldn't say I hate Ethereum, but I think it's extremely limited, and I think the future of a successful DeFi world with mass adoption and real world use cases just by technical limitation is not going to be on Ethereum, let alone anything else. So
Yep.
sort of Ethereum is a good way to get started and get into the ecosystem, but I do think we need to branch out to something
Yeah, and
something
I
else.
think I mentioned it just because I've noticed, there's a lot of competition in Ethereum, and I would say the average user is probably less of a professional. But I've been playing a lot in the ordinal space. There's a lot of money, starting to pour in there, but just not a lot of good projects. I've gotten rugged like 3 times by guys who are just stealing money, and so there's a lot of like bad actors. So it's like you get one good actor in there, and it's really not that hard to do because there's a lot of demand and a lot of money waiting for someone to just do it right. And I think that's the same for Solana. I spent a while trying to find something decent, just the equivalent of what you got for Solana. There were one or two, but the liquidity is like nothing. There's like 10K liquidity kind of thing. So it's like there
Yeah, I mean,
are
liquidity is the
probably
hard.
opportunities. And that's what I was going to
Liquidity
ask
is
you as
always
a
the hard
follow-up.
thing, right?
Yeah, how do you convince people to add that liquidity? Is it just a matter of them trusting your brand, getting out there, offering the right incentives?
I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's a multi-phase thing. I mean, obviously, the system's permissionless, anyone can add it. When the system is working well, like if you look at Uniswap now, or even Ethereum and the ERC20 tokens, the ability to create tokens, like the narrative that you can create pools on Uniswap or create tokens on Ethereum and like have success with that and maybe make money or whatever is well established. So people who would be thinking about doing that will naturally gravitate towards doing that, and some of them will create those pools or whatever. The problem we have is that narrative is not yet established, so people are not just queuing up to randomly just like create new markets and liquidity on Vega.
Yeah. Say that.
Understandably, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's new, and it doesn't have a huge amount of trading volume, like maybe 10 million plus notional a day. So it's not nothing, but it's not huge. Um, the One of the things is like integrations and making it easier. So like we've had paid a bounty into the Hummingbot community, and they've built a connector for Hummingbot, and so we're going to be doing a bunch of like stuff with them around like, hey, you guys, Hummingbot guys, you can actually earn some of the rewards, share in the fee revenue, create markets on Vega. You've got a Hummingbot connector now. Like this is a place you can go, and actually that's an interesting thing for you to do. So things like that will be helpful, and then obviously adding these like liquidity pools where you don't need to run like a market making algo. You actually can just put the money in a pool. So you basically, it's much more like creating a Uniswap pool. You've got like a form you fill in, select a asset oracle from a drop down, fill in a few bits of basic stuff around leverage and risk, and press a button, supply some liquidity, and create a market. Like things like that will make it easier. But then also you've just got, be in the community talking to everyone all the time who might want to create markets and explaining how it works and seeing if they get excited about the protocol. And early on, it's probably people who have a vested interest, and people who already maybe own tokens, and so they also want to see things go well. So they're like more likely to say, "I'm actually already interested in this, so I want to create a market or whatever." So, but it is hard. Like this stage of launching a product is hard, and it's a lot of face-to-face conversations, a lot of people who get interested and then wander off and lose interest, and but eventually, then as you'll see over time, we'll I think now that perps have launched, that's a very popular thing. We have just dated futures before, so now that perps have launched, I think there's a whole bunch of people in the community talking about and thinking about markets they want to go and create now that that tool is available for them. So I think we'll start to see that uptick, and my hope is that sometime around like maybe Q1 next year, it starts to be obvious that the people who did this early on are starting to have a good sort of business case for it. They're starting to make money. They're starting to say, hey, this has been successful. I created this market. I've received these rewards. It's generating this much fee revenue. This much of that's going to me. Like you see that the incentives on chain are working. You see the system is well designed. And then the flywheel starts to turn and people start to say, hey, I could get a bit of that. I could create a market and do it. So, it's a long road with something like this. It's never going to be like build it and they will come, click your fingers and
Yeah.
suddenly it's huge. And there's lots of things you can't do. We can't promote markets and trading on Vega. We can kind of say, hey, with Vega, you can create markets, but we can't and wouldn't and are not going to go, hey, you should trade on Vega. You can make money, because that would be acting like a financial intermediary for the platform we don't even have actual control over. So we have to be super careful. We have to be about the technology, the platform, the community. But it's right to do it that way, and it's right to not overstep those lines and not create the kind of impression that we're kind of in it to make a quick buck, but actually continue to plug away at building and building on it over time and demonstrate the commitment to doing it over multiple years. And I think, we'll see that continue to grow.
Absolutely. So you guys have been building sort of through this bear market, and you've been building even before that. So I was just wondering what your experience has been with sort of the ups and downs, raising investment. I know you guys have some pretty legitimate investors and backers behind you. So I was wondering if you had a strategy early on. Maybe that's raise money when, prices are high, make sure we have enough runway to get through the bear market, and just what your experience has
I
been,
mean, we
raising
started
capital.
raising in the worst bear market. I mean, I think the
Yeah.
bear market of 2018 was probably worse. Like,
Oh, I
everyone talks about
remember
this
it.
bear market, but in 2018, like, everything just stopped.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
No one knew if it
we
was
started
gonna
trying to raise
come
in
back.
like, I don't know, April 2018, and we didn't close the round till like mid 2019. Like, we were pretty much about to die. Pantera kind of came and offered to lead the round, and once they came in and were leading the round and sort of got their check in, then the round started to fall into place. But even then, it wasn't until like 2019 started to kind of get underway that people started to actually progress with those,
Yep.
from term sheets to signing
We
and
love
everything.
to
So that
wait,
was
yeah.
really tricky. Yeah, so that was tricky. I mean, one of the reasons we've been building for so long is actually we were raising for so long. And so, we were a tiny team, until you'd got that money in the bank in sort of mid to end of 2019, you sort of didn't really have the ability to hire significantly. So, it sort of, you had that situation happen, then, we're able to follow that up at the end of 2020 with a kind of strategic round, getting sort of more like institutions that trade in crypto, market makers and others, um, to come on board. Cumberland and Arrington Capital led that round in 2020, which gave us a little bit more sort of dry powder, as they like to say, I guess, a little bit of money to sort of make sure we could do a good job. And with testnet, so we end up launching an incentivized testnet, incentivizing people to come and basically battle test the system, learning a lot about the things that on paper look like a good idea but don't really work very well because they're difficult to manage, or the UX isn't right, or you didn't think about this. So there's a huge amount of either it's kind of funny, you make two sort of similar opposite mistakes. One mistake you make is there's a complex answer that's clearly right to this, but we think we can get away with doing this simple thing instead. And then you realize you should have done the complicated thing. And then on the other half of the time, you think, the simple version of this isn't going to work. We've got to do this complicated thing. And it turns out the complicated thing doesn't matter, and you could have done the simple thing, and the complicated thing no one understands anyway. So we sort of did both of those a few times and had to sort of tweak the protocol and keep iterating until we were ready, finally earlier this year, to launch the mainnet trading network. We had a mainnet like governance and staking network for a year and a bit before that with validators, and that was good, getting the kind of network underway with validators running it while no money was at risk. That was a very good thing to do, and got the validators used to running the network and everything in place. And then this year launched the trading. But a lot of ups and downs in terms of like the market and raising, and going from sort of one extreme to the other in terms of bear markets. And but I think the reality is, in a bear market, it's cheaper to hire people, but it's harder to raise.
Yeah, exactly. I remember the cost of some of those blockchain developers back in the last
I mean,
cycle is just
during bull
absurd.
markets, you get these people like, don't get out of bed for less than some absurd number.
Yeah. So when you're, raising capital from companies or funds like Pantera, I'm sure they have a lot of other DeFi investments. How do you differentiate yourself to them when you're
I
pitching your
mean, I
product?
think, one of the things that is important is the team, like, the experience of the team, the people, the TradFi and the crypto and the technology and the startup experience. Like, having a good team, having that experience is very important. And then I think the other thing is like having a differentiated but very large ambition. We didn't go in and say we want to build a copycat perps exchange and like take 2% of the market share. We went in and said we want to build a piece of infrastructure that could one day take significant chunks of trading away from the City of London and New York, and it will enable people in their bedroom to code up products that are extremely complicated much more easily than any other blockchain or technology. So it'll provide them with primitives to do that. It'll be performant enough and cheap enough from a fee perspective that you can actually use it for real world trading, and it'll provide this infrastructure layer that could move real finance on. And you show them a demo and you say, look, this is where we are. We can do these things. We'll have a Delta One trading platform with perps and futures very soon. And you show them a demo and a UI, and then you tell them this is where we're going and this is our mission, and we want to own a pie that's much bigger than all of crypto because we actually care about the real world use case. And the ultimate thing is, some people think you're mad, you can't do that. Some people think, I don't really care if you can do that. It's not very interesting to me. I don't think it'll pan out that way. And others think, yeah, that is what we want to see happen. We believe it'll happen, and we think you as a team have a good chance of doing it. And the reality is, a VC investor is probably thinking 8 or 9 out of 10 investments are going to go roughly to zero. So they want the 1 or 2 that, if they don't go to zero, are going to be really impactful. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, and then that's like not a disingenuous thing. We're not sort of doing that as a sales pitch. We're doing that because we went into this going, I used to work in the city and I want to take this business away from the big universal banks. And that's why we're designing it how we do, and that's what we're going after. So, it's not in any way just a sales pitch, but I think having a clear mission like that does have a big scale and scope is very helpful when you are trying to raise, because it is sometimes that scale and scope and that potential that people are looking at.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I guess conversely, what is that pitch that, you then take and make to the users who you're now trying to attract? And as a follow-up, is that sort of where you're at now, where now you're just really ready to onboard people, or is it more where you're looking for testers and the right people to give you feedback at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said earlier, it's an alpha, and I would not want to tell people like you should be doing your like life savings on here. Definitely don't do that. But we are at a point where we put something live that has a bunch of features that's kind of at parity or better than a good amount of what's available in centralized and decentralized crypto platforms. We want people to tell us if they like it. We want people to try and use it. Like, if people are traders and the kind of stuff we've built is interesting to them, we want them to come and give it a go and tell us whether or not they would use it, and if not, why not. We want to see people on board, not to do huge volumes, but to actually tell us what we need to fix, tell us what we need to improve. We're at that point now where it's like, you've got this MVP that you're slightly embarrassed by, and it doesn't have a whole bunch of the features that are in your like long-term mission, but it's got enough stuff to do some real things that real people, that has a huge amount of billions of dollars of trading daily, notional, in things that you could do on Vega. And so now we're at that point. We want people to come and use it. We want to get the feedback. We want them to try out creating markets. And we want to start building a community of market creators, liquidity providers, traders, quants who actually understand what we're building and have big plans to come and launch stuff on Vega, or when we introduce more bespoke programmable products, they have plans to create their own products and want to give us feedback on that. So we really want people to come and use it and try it out at this stage, yeah.
So what are those big features that maybe are not even, in the pipeline for the next 5 years, that if you could bake this out for the next 10 that you would love to have, that you think would really be cool?
I mean, I think that the super cool things, probably the biggest, most cool thing, we know how probably to reduce the latency from like 0.7 seconds to a fifth to a tenth of that. And effectively you sort of have validators running multiple nodes so that they're all effectively running some nodes that are close to each other. And you pick a sort of subset that are close to each other for each block so that you can avoid the speed of light going around the world. That's the reason it takes like 0.6 seconds.
Citadel parking their servers right next to the servers.
Yeah, but what you do is you have servers
Everywhere.
next to each other, but in multiple places, so that actually you never have a censorship issue, but you can have each block be produced by a sort of local set and then validated by the rest of the networks a little behind it, but it just allows you to reduce the latency further. And so there's that sort of flocking type thing, as we call it, because sort of the active set of nodes kind of moves around the world like a flock. And then there's like the kind of sharding and scalability story of how do you, the nice thing about something like Vega compared to a complete general purpose chain is like the engine executing market A and the engine executing market B don't need to talk to each other. So they can actually run on different machines, and you don't need to worry about the latency of them talking to each other because they're not going to. So there is a pretty clear path to pretty close to unlimited horizontal scalability, many thousands of markets, and still the same performance. Getting a system which actually implements that path in a completely transparent way to the user and implements those latency improvements, so you get this mega performance uplift even from where we are. That's one of those super cool features that's kind of a research thing we know we could do, but we probably need at least a few tens more millions in the bank, and a little research team dedicated to it, and some level of success with the first and second version of the protocol before we even start. So those are the really cool things. More chain integrations so that you can not only do things with like, with Solana or Avalanche or Polkadot or Cosmos or whatever, but also build contracts on Vega that combine together things on other networks, things on Vega. Yes, there's a whole bunch of like customizability and programmability stuff that would be very cool to do. So there's a lot of those kind of features are the really far out ones. The ones that are coming up a little sooner are things like allowing people to completely custom program their own derivative products and by basically defining the cash flows and then have those products run on Vega. Like so, things like that will probably come next year. And the sort of SDK and the developer community around building really interesting bespoke products and markets will come next year. But yeah, those kind of big performance improvements of turning Vega into this really sort of unstoppable, very performant global infrastructure is the further out bit, I think.
Absolutely, and that leads perfectly into my last question for you, which is you said it's global infrastructure. I know some of the product features are not available in the US. I'm not sure if any of them are. So I was just wondering who your target markets are out the gate, and how
There
you
is no
strategize.
restriction on using Vega in the US.
Oh, there's not. Because I got a VPN
The
thing.
websites that we host, yeah, the websites that we host, we block in the US because we think that there is risks around that. The network itself is run by validators who are not us. As far as I know, none of them block US, and the trading front end itself is actually on IPFS.
Got it.
You can
Cool.
get there like I think Vega Protocol.eth.limo. It's actually a .eth domain run by a bunch of community members with a multi-sig, so that we don't even control the domain. But if you go to Vega Protocol.eth or .eth.limo, you'll actually get the front end from IPFS, and you can interact with the network. So, I mean, I'm not telling you should evade whatever rules the US has in place. The reason we actually block our website is because we don't have the resources or like the retained counsel to even understand whether some of the things we do or say or write would fall foul of the US regulator. And the US is the one that's sort of come extrajudicially after people if they think that you're targeting US citizens. So we kind of said, well, we don't have the resources to work out where the line is with doing this stuff with them. We're not actually offering any services. We're not running a website. We're not running the chain. But until we have a better answer for some of these things, and the US regulators aren't exactly being forthcoming with the answers for what they even think the rules are half the time. So we're kind of just stepping back and saying, well, you can't access the website and stuff here. We want to make it clear that we're not trying to promote this to people in the US. But yeah, as a US person, you can access the front end on IPFS. You can access the nodes. The network should work fine. We're just not doing anything to promote it there.
No worries. So, are you focused on any markets in particular that you are promoting to? Like, I know so many people going to Dubai, and there's a lot of people moving, all about to more friendly jurisdictions. Are you targeting those,
Yeah.
or are you really just,
Yeah, I mean,
whoever and
we're
wherever?
looking at two things. We're looking at where we think we can do like, I mean, obviously we're not going to go out running around like financial promotion to retail people in a way that's unethical or not allowed. But like we're looking at places where we can do some level of activity because we have a reasonable amount of confidence what the rules are, but where we've also got good communities. Like some of the biggest traders on Vega right now are in Korea.
Yep.
So we've been going out to Korea, meeting our community there. We've got validators and investors out there. Hashtra an investor, B Harvester a validator. They've introduced us to trading groups. So we're starting to meet all these people who are users or potential users of Vega, and they're interested in it and they like it. So we ran a really well attended event there. We actually had like Charles from DYDX and a bunch of other people on a panel at this event we put on, and it's been going really well out there. So we sort of that works. We keep going back and just kind of build a community there and talk to those users. And so everywhere where that happens, partly just where those people are, because if they want to talk to us and if they're building a community, we want to make sure we're there for them. And partly just because Korea is a big trading place. It's more clear what we can do there. So we're being smart about where we go out on the ground and talk to community members and try and build a bigger community. Ultimately, we want Vega to be open and global and run by the validators, and it's ultimately open source software, and we want everyone to be able to use it. But the speed at which that becomes possible and where we put our resources in the short term is just based a little bit on some of that.
Sure. Well, I think coming on platforms like this is a great step as well. Just putting a face to the name, getting out there, talking to people. I think that's a huge part of this industry is just the trust you build with the average person and letting them know what you think and why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely, and it's always a pleasure to come on shows like yours and talk about this stuff, go into a bit of detail. Like you say, build a connection with the community and the people and your listeners and followers, and hopefully people will come and check out what we're building and see if they like it.
Absolutely. So where can those people check out what you're building? Do you
Um,
have any social media, etc.?
yeah, so we are Vega Protocol on Twitter, or X as it's now called, I guess. We are on Vega.xyz, which, as you mentioned, is actually blocked in the US. So if you're a US listener, you will not be able to go there. And we have a sort of very active Discord where people talk about everything that's going on, talk about markets they're launching, governance, and everything. So you can check out the Discord links from Twitter or from the website.
Yep. And I'll add those all to the episode description for you guys so that you have them. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode, probably in the next few days. So I appreciate it, Barney, and we'll hopefully have you back to get an update in a little bit.
Awesome. I'll be happy to come back maybe sometime next year.
That sounds great. Thank you guys.
Brilliant. Cheers.